This is almost there. Are you almost ready, Jake?
Yeah, I'm pretty much ready to go.
Okay, all right. I think, yeah, we're online. Let's go.
Cool. Hi everyone, I'm Jake. I'm the Headbarista here at the bar. Today I'm going to take you guys through making a French press. Probably one of my favorite ways to make coffee on, actually. Yeah, super simple. Pretty much, if you follow this recipe, it's really hard to mess it up. The approach we take here is similar to what we do when we cup coffee. For those of you who don't know, cupping is the way that we taste coffee when we're doing our quality control. It basically involves grinding a set amount of coffee into a nice bowl like this. It's kind of specially designed for the purpose, and then filling with a set amount of water, and the coffee is in the water the whole time, so there's no filtration or anything like that, so you're really tasting just the purest form of the coffee. It's really good for checking for defects and any kind of thing like that, in terms of quality control. So basically, the approach we take to making a French press is based off what we do in the cupping bowl. Obviously, with a French press, you have this nice filtration system, so you can filter out any coffee grinds as well. So that's essentially the only difference. Yeah, cool. So we get started. Some quick fun facts about the French press. Invented in 1929 by a guy called Ugo Paolini, an Italian guy in Milan. So I find this funny because for those of you who don't know, we always think about espresso as being an Italian thing, but it was actually invented in France, and then this is obviously called a French press, but was invented in Italy, so there you go. Cool. So the ratio of coffee that we are using is about 1 to 15.5. This is kind of very close to what the SCA guidelines are for cupping, but we go with a slightly higher strength, and that's basically just a personal preference thing. You could go a little bit lower or you could go a little bit higher. I mean, it's up to you really. The goal is we're aiming for 21% extraction when we're checking quality, so that's for us the most important thing. So for the cupping bowl, we're going to use 13 grams of coffee and 200 grams of water. And for the French press, we're going to use 26 grams of coffee and 400 grams of water. The coffee we're using today is a beautiful wash bourbon from Rwanda, Mahembe. It's from the Western Province near Lake Kivu. We've been working with Justin and the guys for coming up on 7 years now. Super, super complex coffee, very, very quality driven. The coffee is sorted at 3 different stages. First at the farm by hand, and then at the dry mill, it goes through an optical sorter, and then one more time on the belt is sorted again by hand. So it's very, very high quality and a super complex coffee. It's actually, for me personally, one of the first coffees that really kind of took me when I started working at the bar. And it's something I look forward to every year. This is the espresso roast of this coffee. We have a filter and an espresso roast normally. It works, again, perfectly for filter. French press in general, I'd say, is good. A lot more forgiving for espresso roast than other kind of filter methods, I would say, because of the kind of closeness to the cupping bowl. Cool. So let's get started. I'm going to make these both at the same time. So just quickly run you through our recipe. Basically, for the cupping bowl, I'm going to pour 200 grams of water straight in there. I'm going to pour always down the side, and it's going to start swirling, and as it gets to the top, I'm going to move to the other side, and that's going to stop the swirl, and it should be pretty much still by the end. I might kind of go side to side at the end to make sure it's not swirling, because I don't want to create when I've got multiple bowls, I don't want to create differences in agitation between the bowls. That's the main reason. Then at 4 minutes, we're going to do what we call breaking. And I'm going to take a cupping spoon. I'm going to start at the back. I'm going to push it right to the bottom, push forward, lift up, push forward, lift up, push forward. So 3 times. This is going to break the crust of coffee, so there'll be a lot of coffee that has risen and is like granules sitting on the top of the liquid. This is going to break through that and let it settle to the bottom. Whatever's left on the top, I'm going to take another spoon, start at the back with the spoons together, bring them forward, and I'm just going to scoop it up and discard whatever's sitting on the top. So in terms of what we're going to do with the plunger, quite similar, but instead of scraping and scooping, I'm going to take a stirrer, I'm going to stir 3 times, and then I'm going to plunge. Normally with a cupping bowl, we taste it around 13 minutes. So we're going to plunge this. That's basically going to slow down or stop the extraction. I'm going to wait another minute, and then I'm going to decant, and then we just need to let it sit until it cools to the temperature that we want to drink it at. Cool. All right, let's get started. So I have my coffee here.
Can you tell us about your grind setting a little bit?
Oh yeah, I didn't even talk about that. So we use I would say like a medium grind. It's not super coarse. I know the traditional kind of understanding of brewing a French press would be to use a very coarse grind, but because we're basing our method off what we do in the cupping bowl, it's not that coarse. That's because the method we use, we're focusing on trying to get the optimal extraction and the optimal strength that we think is nice to drink coffee at, and that involves a slightly finer grind. The other thing is, it's an immersion brew method, so we're not running the risk of any choking or channeling because the coffee is sitting in the water the whole time, so we can actually go a lot finer. I would even say that you can make a brew at around a medium strength. If it tastes good, next brew, try it even a little bit finer, and you could even go finer until eventually it's going to start tasting bitter, but you'll be quite surprised at how fine you can actually go. Cool. So I'm just going to pop this in here.
What do you smell? I'm so curious about the aromas.
So, a lot actually. So this coffee is, like I said, super complex. I get a lot of spices, I would say, maybe some cinnamon, some kind of black tea, some black pepper even, and the dry aroma. So it's super interesting. When we're evaluating coffee as well, we're always looking at the dry aroma first. It's the first thing that we do when we're making an evaluation. So yeah, I would recommend doing that as well. It's really interesting to get the difference in your own mind between what you're smelling in the dry aroma, what you're smelling once you've added water. The time to check that would be when you're cupping. As you're breaking, you have your nose right next to the cup, and as you break that crust, it's going to release all of the aromas into the air. So that would be the time to get a good gauge on the wet aroma. And then what you taste finally, and the comparison between the 3 things, because often it's quite different. You might smell crazy spices and flavors in the dry aroma, but then when you come to taste the coffee, you don't get any of that, or you get something totally different. So it's always good to check both those things. Cool. I'm going to start with the cupping bowl. I'm going to start the timer, and I'm just pouring quite aggressively into the side of the bowl. And then I'm coming across, just going side to side, and you can see that the movement slowed right down.
Super cool.
And it's still by the time I stop. That's very important if you have, like I said, multiple bowls, and you want to make sure that there's the same amount of agitation in each bowl. So at 30 seconds, I'll start my French press. So same deal.
Kind of moving in circles, right?
Yeah, at the beginning, but then I'm gonna stop that by doing this.
And that's 400 mils, or what's?
400 grams, yeah, so 400 mils.
Nice.
Here you can put the lid on, just slightly, like that, to trap a little bit more of the heat. I'm not sure if that actually is effective or not. I mean, that's really a personal preference thing. I'm gonna leave it open because then it's matching what I'm doing with the cupping bowl. Cool.
Right.
So usually on a Sunday here we would be running our public cupping, but unfortunately at the moment that's not possible. We're really looking forward to being able to do that again, so it's nice to kind of in a small way be able to do a little cupping just with me and Ralph with one coffee and you guys watching at home.
Yeah. Just thinking about Rwanda, I mean, you had a trip planned and now it's cancelled.
It's very disappointing. I'd rather not think about that.
Yeah.
Hopefully next time.
Yeah, well, at least we have Mahembe here and we can enjoy it.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite origins of coffee, I'd have to say. And this coffee as well. I think this year in particular has been really fantastic for Mahembe. Really nice. It's very consistent, I find. Always very strong with a kind of dark cherry-like acidity, very, very malic-like acidity.
Yeah.
Almost cola flavors as well this year. So every now and then that starts to come through depending on the year, but this year I find it quite strong and definitely the black tea in terms of florals.
Can you touch on potato quickly, what it is?
So potato defect is a defect that is found sometimes in Rwandan coffee. It's caused by a small bug that bites into the cherry, and there's a bacteria that is kind of living on the bug that causes a defect in the coffee. It's called potato defect because when you grind it, it kind of smells like potatoes. This is just a fact basically about Rwandan coffee. Any coffee that you buy from Rwanda that has the potential to have potato defect. At Mahembe, they do basically everything possible to avoid this. They have traps set up for the bugs all over the farm with a sweet, in like Coca-Cola bottles with like sweet liquid to trap the females to stop them breeding. They're also, like I touched on before, sorting at the farm. They're turning each cherry like 4 times, looking for any signs that the bug has been into the cherry. Then at the dry mill, that goes through an optical sorter, and then it goes onto a belt where it is again hand sorted. So basically everything is done to ensure that there's no potato. All right, so I'm going to break this coffee now. I'm going to get right down and try and get all those aromas when I break the crust. So
1, 2, and 3, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
So I'm going right to the bottom, pushing forward 3 times.
Nice.
So now you can see there's still some liquid floating on the top. I'm just going to take these, not liquid, still some grinds on the top. Take the spoons.
Stop extracting them. Perfect. Wow.
Get rid of that.
Nice.
All right, so now I'm going to do some stirs on this. 1, 2, 3.
Really quite a stir, right?
Quite a stir.
Yeah.
Making sure I'm going right to the bottom.
Yeah. Very good.
Then I'm going to plunge this. Nice and slow.
Interesting that you said plunger. There's so many words for this method, right?
Yeah, I think it's dependent on where you live in the world. Like where I'm from in New Zealand, we'd call it a plunger. It's like not so common to call it a French press, actually.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ralph, I've completely forgotten the German word.
Stempelkanne.
Stempelkanne. So in German, a Stempelkanne.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to wait for 5 minutes here, and then I'm going to decant this because I want to remove it from the grinds.
I think we say cafetiere as well.
Cafetiere?
Yeah. Wow, look at that color. There's a lot of fines in there, right?
Yeah, it is a little bit cloudier than what you would get from, say, a V60.
Well, quite a bit, eh?
That doesn't bother me personally. I mean, I like that because, I mean, obviously at the barn we do a lot of quality control, which means a lot of cupping. And of all the ways to taste coffee, I find I get the most out of the coffee in the cupping bowl. 100%.
Yeah.
So this being the closest method to that, I think, you know, It's good, and it's okay to have a little bit of a cloudy brew sometimes.
It's good.
Unless it's a V60. I don't want a cloudy V60.
It's great mouthfeel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are a couple of variations that you can do on this as well. So I pressed it 4 minutes after I stirred, or it probably would have been 4 minutes 10. You could also stir, and then you could let it sit until 10 minutes, up to 10 minutes, I would say, and then press. It's up to you. It's really one of those things where I would experiment with the different things, different kind of times. So always stir at 4 minutes, so you're emulating the cupping bowl, and then how long you leave it is kind of up to you. I probably wouldn't leave it longer than 10 minutes, but kind of you could leave it 2 minutes, 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Just experiment and see what works best for you. I would definitely also experiment with the different grind sizes. Try and go a little bit finer. If it tastes good, next time, go a little bit finer.
Yeah. It still extracts a little bit after 4 minutes, but very, very slowly.
Very slowly. So the extraction is going to be very slowed. In our QC, we've experimented a lot with where we measure the TDS, which is for those of you who don't know, the total dissolved solids in the liquid, and that's how we calculate our extraction. So we tested measuring it at 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes, 8 minutes, 9 minutes, 10 minutes, and it really does slow down a lot. I mean, there are small differences, but it's quite slow, especially once you get to, say, 8, 9, 10 minutes, the difference is quite marginal.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have a wee try. It smells great.
Talking about acidity and sweetness maybe in that brew compared to AeroPress or V60, is there any difference bringing out other qualities with this?
I think the acidity is actually very clear in a French press, and I think that's because of how similar it is to a cupping bowl. I find the acidity and the sweetness both to be quite clear. It's maybe not as clean a cup as you would get, or maybe it's a little less refined perhaps than what you can get from a V60, for example, but I kind of like that personally. It's just raw, you know. It's like if you take away technique, if you take away recipe, really, if you take away all these other kind of things that you're trying to manipulate the coffee to be in a certain way, it's just the coffee as it is. It's just ground coffee and water, which is, you know, if you've got a bad coffee, it's gonna show. But if you have a great coffee, it's also gonna taste great every time. So yeah, it's great.
Cool.
Have we got any questions coming through?
The one question is the cooling. You know, we always say like, take your time, let it cool, let the flavor and the coffee open up. What happens there?
I think that's a lot about how we perceive taste. I think your palate can't really perceive all of the flavors when the liquid's too hot. It's just burning your mouth. You can't taste anything. I would always recommend not to drink it lukewarm, but you definitely don't want to be able to, you need to be able to take a full mouthful in your mouth without burning yourself. If you have to sip it, it's too hot.
Yeah.
We're able to drink this now, I would say, without letting it cool so much more, but that's mostly due to the fact that the brew time is quite a bit longer than the other methods, so the liquid is naturally a little bit cooler.
Yeah.
It's tasting fantastic, actually.
I saw that my friend Wendelin is online. Maybe she has a question for us, if it's not too early in the Netherlands. She's the AeroPress World Champion. She was on the virtual coffee fest the other day, showing us different brew methods. So
I might just quickly show people as well how to taste at a cupping, just while I have the cupping bowl sitting here. This is maybe a little bit, it's probably okay actually. It's about 12 minutes. So when you're cupping, we have special spoons that look like that. It looks like a soup spoon, basically. I mean, there's not much difference between a cupping spoon and a soup spoon, if we're honest.
Yeah.
But basically we're taking a small amount of liquid like this.
Yeah.
Up to you how much.
Yeah.
And we're going to slurp it in a way. We want to suck as much. We kind of want the liquid to spray and hit everywhere in our mouth. So you're taking a very short, quick breath with the coffee, bringing in a little bit of air, and also making sure that that liquid sprays everywhere so it covers like your whole mouth. And then we're spitting it out. It's a little bit noisy. Doesn't need to be too noisy though. So all of you guys with your very loud cupping whistles, I'm gonna say that it maybe doesn't need to be that loud, but you probably do need to hear some sound.
Yeah. We're just calling the others to join our cupping, you know.
Yeah. Exactly. Cool. So we're going to be back again tomorrow as well. Slightly later. We said 2:30, right?
2:30 because we are roasting in the morning, so it's going to be a little bit noisy here.
You won't be able to hear us, so we're going to do 2:30 our time.
Yeah.
Here in Germany. And we're going to go through hand grinders, a few kind of tips on setting the grind, maybe look at like cleaning them perhaps as well, or like general care.
Yeah.
We'll go through a few different types.
Yeah. That's awesome. Can you just compare the two tastes of the two bowls, the French press and the cupping bowl?
Honestly, very similar.
What are you getting there?
Lots of cherry, lots of dark cherry actually, and a little bit of cola, and then this kind of like subtle black tea notes at the end. Yeah, very sweet. I'd have to say it's very, very sweet.
Yeah.
For such a complex coffee, there's always the kind of, possibility, especially with washed coffees, that the acidity can become a little bit overwhelming. But there's just so much sweetness in this cup.
Yeah.
Nice, almost like caramel kind of sugar cane kind of sweetness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
and the other is very similar as well. I get a slightly nicer body from the French press, I'd have to say.
Yeah.
That's the main difference. The body's a little bit more. It's a little bit thicker. The mouthfeel, and maybe the acidity is slightly more tame. But you could get this to taste exactly like that, depending on how long you leave it before plunging. I would say if you left it for 10 minutes and then plunged, it would probably taste exactly the same as the cupping bowl, I'd say.
I think very interesting what James Hoffman did in the first Brewers World Championship in Maastricht when he came in second. He did the cupping bowl, and then he was filtering it out through the linen cloth that we have on the Harrier wood neck. And that's maybe also something that if someone wants to geek a little bit more at home, to take that cupping bowl and then filter it out after.
I mean, that is essentially a French press. It's a very similar principle. In fact, in the early French presses, they used to use a cheesecloth. It wasn't a metal filter at all. So it's like, I think, a very kind of similar approach.
Yeah.
It would taste very similar to the cupping bowl. I've always personally found as well, it's very hard, because I'm such a fan of this of immersion brew methods in general, and also the kind of rawness of the cupping bowl, and you kind of get all of the flavors, good and bad, if there is any bad flavors, because this is the closest method to that. I have a soft spot, let's say, for the French press.
All right. I think it's Sunday morning, I'm going to go home now and make one for my breakfast.
Cool.
Okay. So you're back tomorrow at 2:30, right?
At 2:30. Cool.
Okay.
All right, we'll see you guys then.
Thanks for coming out this morning. Ciao.